welcome to another lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam. Let's continue on. So, remembering that diaphora is what makes one species different from another in a genus. Differentiae is the word that I'm going to use. You could just use the English word difference, but difference seems too broad, too general, too common for me. Differentiae is a word which serves the concept best. So these things that I'm about to explain are not in a subject physically. Okay? Pesdon gaito dipun kathupo kaimanu men legetai tu anthropo. So we can speak of having feet, or being bipedal according to man, of course. But the sheer manifestation of bipedalness, if it does exist, is certainly not in a human being. And hypokaimenoidaugastin, right? A instance of what it means to be bipedal is found in every human being. Okay, like that bloke right there. Is there any other? No. Okay, and to be footed, another diaphora, these are high diaphorae, are found here. That horse has feet, or mule, or whatever it might be, and that man has feet. Okay, they are diaphora, right? What would that separate a man from? Well, that would separate a man from a snake, a worm. It would separate it from most fish. Or all fish. I know that some people like to say, well, this fish uses these things like feet. Okay, I get you. Yeah, okay, let's continue on before I go down that rabbit hole. Hugaren tui anthropoi estito dipun eto pesdon. For in a man, Hogarentoi anthropoi estito dipun eto pesdon, kai ho logos de categoraitai huotes diaphoras. Right, so in some particular man, there is the two-footedness or the or feet in the way that I've expressed it before. Okay, so it's substantiated. Okay, what does it mean to have 2 feet? Well, man is, wow, this is still here. Man is an example of that. Okay, what does it mean to have 4 feet? A cow and a horse is an example of that. All right, but if you conceptualize two-footedness, right, that's as a concept, it's not actually physically present in those things anywhere. All right. Why is that important? That's important for some more subtle reasons and some finer nuances, but it's also important because he really pushes back against his teacher, the philosopher who wrote this. Plato was the teacher of this man, and this idea sort of goes against the idea of forms, but that's something that we'll discuss at a further point. Kahologus de categoraitai huotes diaphoras, kathubu an legetai he diaphora. Alright, so the he diaphora, the differentia, what makes one species different from another, can be said of man, okay? And what it means, where's logos here? Logos, the definition can be predicated to. So if there is a definition of man, right, and he is two-footed, the definition of two-footed can be applied to man, like going on 2 feet. All right, can be applied. That's the chain of predication working again. All right, broader terms being passed down to the individual substance, individual primary substance. Gets passed down. Okay, everything that can be said about being bipedal can be said of man too in that sense. So yeah, you can predicate bipedal of man, and you can you could also define him by that as well. What does that mean? So let me get a better picture here. It's so far in the distance. So how does Daniel get around? Does he get around on all fours like these lions? No. Do the lions go around on 2 feet? No. If you said that they are quadrupeds, if you gave them the name quadrupeds, you can define them, okay, according to that definition. If you gave him the name biped, then you can define him by what it means to be a biped, all right? Those are perfectly fine, all right? Not overly specific, that's to be sure, because there are other things that are bipedal. An ostrich is bipedal, an emu is cassowary is bipedal, a pigeon, you know, sort of, if it's clipped its wings, it's going to be bipedal, and quadrupeds can be shared with all sorts of animals, all right? But yes, you may define them as that. Now that that is covered, let's continue on. Pesdongar estin ho anthropos, right? So footed, man has feet, all right? I know that's all right. I know that's sort of straightforward. Me tarateto de hemas ta mere ton usion hos en hypokaimenois onta tois holois me pote anakastomen gusias auto fascain ainai ugar huto ta en hypokaimenoi elegeto ta hos mere hypar containtini. All right, so got a bit of attitude here. This is where we will conclude this lesson and we'll wrap up all of this idea. So just going over it. So kai ho logos ho tu pesdu kategore thesetai tu anthropu. So the definition of being footed shall be, right? You could say shall be predicated of man, all right? Gets passed down to man, all right? Pesdongar estin ho anthropos. For a man is footed. This becomes very, very important for conceptual ideas like resurrected, for saved, right? When we talk about salvation, this comes in, this is very, very important for that sort of discussion, okay? So that's where this is heading. That's sort of how far this idea can stretch. Me taratetto, right? Let us not be disturbed. Let us not be stirred up, right? The hemas, right? Let this thing not disturb us. Ta mere ton usion, hosen chupokaimenoi onta, tois holois. Let it not disturb us that the parts of these things are in the subjects like parts of a whole. Right? So we look here, all right? We don't look at this man and his animalness and humanness and his differentia as different parts in a whole. Like he's 30%, he's 50% animal, 50% human, and the humanness has 25% bipedal, and the animalness has 50% capable of breathing. All these things. Okay, it's not how it works. Okay, we're not some geometric sort of thing there. We've already covered why that's not the case. I've said it at length, ad nauseum at this point. So let's continue on. Me pote anakastomen. All right, for it is not necessary usias auta fascainainai to for it is not necessary to speak of the substances this way. Right? Ugar huto tain hypokaimenoi elegeto ta hosmere hyparkontaentini. Look at this. What do I keep harping on about? He doesn't let things go. When he teaches something, he keeps referring back to it. This is a more subtle one, but if you pay attention, you figure it out. Ugar huto taren hypokaimenoi elegetto. So spoken of, ta hos mere hyparkonta entini. Go back up here. Go back up here. Look. I think it's in a bracket somewhere. Look. Entini me hos meros. So, en hypokaimenoi delego, right? So he's saying in a subject, I say in a subject, ho entini me hos meros, not like a part, but, okay, something that cannot exist outside of that which it is in. An accident. Something that cannot exist outside that which it is in. And look at this, a pretty much word for word copy. Ta hos mere hyperconta entini. Right? It's something that cannot exist outside of what it is in. Right? It's not like a part, a physical part, a cog in a machine. It's just something that cannot exist outside of that, and owes its existence to the primary, secondary substances. Okay, so accidents, in a way. All right, sort of inseparable accidents. You know, to be footed. Of course, you know, someone can lose their feet. You know, soldiers can come back from war and have lost their feet from different types of mines or artillery or whatnot. Even disease, trench foot, you name it. Okay? But naturally, it's expected that a human has 2 feet. And so it's like an inseparable feature, a property of being a human. A property of being a human is being footed. All right? Something that can change, of course, but is expected, and if nothing does interfere with it, will remain there for life. Okay, so these two, should they not have a hunting accident or have terrible frostbite, get lost in the snow, they will keep their feet for the rest of their life. And they're born with it, and they will die with it. Naked they came into the world, naked they would leave it, but they would leave it with what they came into the world with. All right, sure, teeth may fall out, they may lose an eye, but that is contingent on this or that happening. All right, it is necessary that they were born with their feet and their arms and whatnot, owing by virtue of what they are, okay, human beings, and it is contingent that they may lose it before their time on earth expires. All right, before they go that way that so many have gone before us. All right, and so these differentia, like being aquatic, being quadrupedal, hexapedal, an octopod, right, like an octopus. These are not in any particular substance, like parts in a whole. They are just there as inseparable accidents, properties of the substance. Okay, yeah, we might leave it there. So all these, look, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, 1 head, 1 head. All right, they're not born with 2 heads. Okay, they're not born with no heads. They're not born with 4 legs. They're not born with 6 legs. These are differentia at play. They are physical manifestations of what it means to be in these secondary substances, in this species, in this genera, with their unique differentia. And you can learn about every species and genus by looking at its particular properties, its differentia. All right, so ask any biologist that, they will happily agree with the fact that you can learn about from primary substances, from individuals, you can learn about the species and the genus at large. Right, that is a method that you can use. All right, if this was your sample size, all right, you would have plenty of data to go by and plenty of confidence to assume that all other members of the species that they belong to also share the differentia of being bipedal, having 2 arms. I don't know the Latin term for being having two arms by I'm not too sure, I have to look that up. So same here, look, they all, if this was your sample size now, right, you would be extraordinarily confident that these unique differentia would be found in as properties in all other members of the species. Of the genus, probably not. But hey, you know, if you saw great apes in the Congo or other parts of the world or in the zoo, and you saw that they were bipedal, they had two arms, one head, you could then start your investigative work and see if these great apes and the human beings share something in common. Could they possibly fit the same category, the same requirements to be in a shared class of things, a genus? Okay, so that is how things like that work. And sometimes things may look similar but be different. So, you know, the first time you see a horse and a cow, you might think, oh wow, they look similar, okay, but then you realize that they're different, right? If they both died and you did an anatomy of them, you would find that their organs were very different, possibly, and their bone structure is very different. So maybe you split them into different genera. So that is an example of how that works. It's quite a scientific sort of logical lesson today, but it's also important for ontology. It's also important for other things, especially this me tarateto, the hemas tamere. This will come up later as well. All right, so see how all these things are connected. And yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for listening today. My name is Liam, and as always, si semper fortis in opere tuo. I'll see you next time.